Welcome back. You know, over the years, I've used a lot of different gun cleaning solvents, and I guess every time I bought a different gun cleaning solvent, I read the bottle and I read the promises, and I went home and I cleaned the gun, and 15 minutes later it was as clean as the gun was when I cleaned it with the other guy's solvent. I probably should have paid more attention to the price on the bottle and the amount that I got per penny. That's probably the most important thing. Over the years, I've probably settled back to my standard old favorite, which is Hoppy's, and that's because it smells to me like one of the best colognes that there ever was made. And that's why a lot of people buy Hoppy's No. 9, is because it just smells good. If you like Ballistol because that smells good to you, or if you like the way it feels on your fingers when you're using it, go ahead. The most important thing is for a gun cleaning solvent is to cut into the caked on mud that accumulates inside of a gun. The carbon fouling that builds up as a byproduct of shooting, the different agents that are inside the gun. It could be a little bit of gun oil. It could be, you're always going to have powder fouling from the carbon buildup that is deposited, and you have primer residue. All those things together basically form a smudge and some sort of a gunk inside the gun that has to be removed. And the only purpose that a gun cleaning solvent really fills is to dissolve it, just like detergent dissolves grease stains. It just dissolves the carbon and accumulated fouling and flushes it away. And you can use, with the assistance of a bristle brush, a soft nylon brush for your receiver and your gun parts. If you're cleaning your model 1911, you're going to have carbon all over the place. Just take an old toothbrush or one of those military style OD toothbrushes and go at it with some Ballistol or Hoppy's No. 9 or Outers or whatever your favorite solvent is, and clean it out. Now, when I say that, avoid, there've been people who have touted some things that I consider extreme, and I would not recommend for one moment that anybody use anything like white gasoline, which is essentially naphtha, or Zippo lighter fluid or anything like that. These highly volatile solvents, are very dangerous, and they can essentially blow your house up. If you have your boiler running, or if your water heater should suddenly come on while you're using that stuff, and that vapor passes over them, you could have a very serious catastrophe on your hand that has a lot, that can cause a lot of damage. Not only that, but they're not designed for attacking carbon residue. They're designed for lighting lanterns and for lighting your Zippo lighter. So stay away from that and stick with gun cleaning solvents. Now let me explain a little bit about what the proper approach to gun cleaning should be. Like everybody else, in my early shooting career, it was, I first saw that green patch coming through the end of a barrel after it was soaked in Hoppy's for a little while, and I said, oh wow, I have some copper fouling. So I would pass that patch through 100 times, and it would keep coming out green. So then I would soak the bore and let it sit overnight, and then pass it through, and it would come out emerald green or turquoise until I was really it seemed like I could never get it completely out. Well, you really can't, and the reason being is because the bore is effectively plated with copper. Now that's not a bad thing. I know that might sound like heresy for many of you out there, but copper fouling in a bore is something which is effectively a very good thing to have. Let me explain this. Let's go back to some of the earlier methods of rifling a bore and how they were constructed. In not too many years past, the standard procedure for cutting rifling was with hooks, steel hooks that were pulled through the bore with a rotary cam, and incrementally cut the rifling around the circumference by removing metal. Another process was so-called button rifling, which takes a negative impression of a rifled bore and pulls it through the bore on a helical cam, and that doesn't cut the bore. It actually displaces metal and forms the bore around that mandrel. Now, those methods had the effect, in a mass production environment, they had the effect of naturally wearing down over time. And so as those instruments were pulled through one successive bore after another, they became more and more worn until they were finally, thrown in the scrap heap, and they used a new one. So you might have gotten a barrel that was made with a brand new cutter, or you may have gotten a barrel that was made by a cutter just before they scrapped it. But in the meantime, those cutters, in the process of cutting, they chattered and they left different impressions, and they scratched, and all sorts of things which basically left impressions within the bore. And if anybody, in my profession as a police officer, we used to look at the striations of a bullet, from an investigation, and we could actually see the impressions of the rifling and the cutting device that was used at one time on that bullet under a microscope. In the modern technology now, for the most part, barrels that were made in the last couple of decades have been manufactured using hammer forging. Now, hammer forging is an entirely different concept, which Weatherby was using it for many years. It's essentially the process of taking a short, heavy billet of steel with a hole bored through. A workman inserts the mandrel and is placed inside of a big, gigantic machine that makes a horrendous noise, and everybody around the area has to wear hearing protection. And rotary hammers basically beat that mandrel up just like you were rolling dough on a table service to make pretzels. But basically, it's making a formed barrel. The outside of the barrel is formed at the same time that the inside of the barrel is formed. When it's all done, usually even the chamber is formed around the mandrel. The mandrel is a negative of the barrel interior. So they'll actually form the chamber. It's what's called a short chamber, so that all is required is during the final assembly of the rifle barrel and fitting with the bolt to the receiver. They do the head spacing. The final workman, the head spacer, takes his finish reamer and he cuts that chamber to fit and give that final head spacing to dimension for the go, no-go, and field gauges. So what we have there is a barrel which is not only dimensionally perfect, because the mandrel is, that's it. That barrel is impressed around that mandrel, and as perfect as that mandrel is, that's the way that bore is. And they're very, very smooth, and there's a hard glaze finish inside that bore. And to top it off now, a lot of your AR-15s and some barrels are they're given a hard chrome plating on the inside as well, which further stabilizes the surface and makes it very, very hard and smooth. They don't have so much of the machining marks that are on the bullet surface, and they don't collect quite as much copper as the bullet passes down through. Now, gilding metal on a copper jacketed bullet is a lot softer than gun metal. It has to be, otherwise you'd have catastrophic results. The bullet, in passing through the barrel, leaves some of its copper on the inside of the barrel with the first few shots. It might be a dozen shots. It might be the first 100 shots. We don't know. It's neither here nor there. But a lot of people will notice when they first buy a gun and they fire, say, maybe a box or two through it, they'll notice that their groups have shrunk down, and then they call the barrel broken in. Well, there is really no such thing as breaking in a barrel. When you break in a automobile engine or the transmission, you're actually burnishing the steel, and the steel is becoming honed against its interacting steel components, and it's smoothing out. In effect, that breaking in continues throughout the life of the engine to a lesser degree until the engine it just no longer has any compression. But a gun barrel doesn't work that way. A gun barrel, being much harder than the gilding metal of the bullet jacket, is very stable. You know, there's no change to the gun barrel, so there's no breaking in of a gun barrel. Now, with regard to barrels which are hammer forged, they're super smooth inside, and they're very stable, and that's why you have gun barrels now that can routinely advertise minute of angle accuracy or better. And that's because the barrels are just simply more stable, and they're lump free on the inside. There's no hills and valleys where particles you know, are shed from the bullet and where they build up, just like a glacier leaves stones on the hills of New Hampshire, you know, as it passed over thousands of years ago. So, you know, when you don't have that instability of, you know, those lumps and bumps inside the barrel, you have a smooth bore. Now, the first few times, however, no matter how smooth any metal surface is, when you look at it under a microscope, it becomes a much different. It becomes a much different thing. Now you can see, you know, microscopic holes, and it looks like a rough road. I mean, if you were to look at a you know, rough pavement, concrete, and you look at the inside of a gun barrel through a 10-power loop, you're going to be looking at the same kind of thing. It's very rough looking. You know, it doesn't look at all as if it's a smooth piece of steel. But the metal, the gilding metal of the jacket will fill in that microscopic rough surface, and it will effectively plate it and smooth it out. Much the same as a painter goes through a room before he paints and primes and paints it. He'll go around with a you know, steel trowel, and he'll take some joint compound or spackle, and he'll go over that wall, and when he's done, he's smoothed it out, and so he can go ahead and paint, and anybody looking at that wall would never know that there were holes all over it before from pictures that people hung through the years. And that's the same thing that happens inside of a gun barrel. We're not breaking it in, but what we are doing is we're conditioning the barrel. We're actually plating the inside of the barrel and smoothing it out so that it becomes smooth. Now, when we've plated the inside of the barrel and it becomes smooth, we've reduced its tendency to further collect more gilding metal. In other words, now the bullets can pass down through without resistance, and they slide down through the barrel with a lot more lubricity, and they don't continue to shed, as a lot of people think, they don't continue to shed stuff and leave more particles and leave lumps. They won't do that in a high-grade, high-power rifle barrel. What can exacerbate an issue for shooters is the continual process of trying to deplate the barrel, and that is by taking, you know, harsh ammonia-based solvents, or something that will, you know, chemically attack copper or bronze, and they go inside the barrel and they aggressively scrub that barrel and, you know, soak it overnight and all these things, and they've depleted, they've taken that conditioning out of the bore. Now they've returned it back to its rough state that it was to begin with, and over time, you know, the bore brush now has got contact with that steel. Every time it goes through that bore, it has closer contact with the steel. Instead of rubbing against the copper, where the bore is protected from, you know, the bronze brush, now you've got the bronze brush constantly rubbing against the steel, and you're actually degrading the barrel. Not that that's gonna effectively change the accuracy of the barrel much, but what it will do is it creates a little bit more difficulty for cleaning subsequently, because you're making it rougher. Remember, you started out with a beautifully polished barrel. When you're plating the bore by firing the first few rounds, or maybe the first 20 or 50 rounds or whatever over your, you know, new rifle, you've conditioned it, and in no small way you've actually done the same thing in some measure that a person who's you know, lapped the bore, but now you're lapping it by actually, you know, applying a material over it. You don't want to remove that. You want to leave that alone. It won't continue to keep building up. It basically will. The whole process reaches a point where it's leveled in, and then it stays there. There's no detriment to having that so-called fouling. It probably should have a different word, because it's really not fouling whatsoever. It's actually it's a conditioning of the bore. Now, if you have a bore which you are, subjecting to lead bullet shooting. Now, if you do a lot of cast bullet shooting, and that's a different story. Altogether. Now you've got a, now you're interplaying with the alloy of the bullet, which could be too soft for the velocity that you're shooting. The hardness of the alloy, the tin and antimony content of the lead, and the other factors, that can, or maybe the type of lubricant that you're using on the bullet, maybe that's not sufficient and it's causing lead deposits. That's quite another thing. And if you've got a gun that you intend to be shooting lead bullets with, I highly recommend that before you fire lead bullets, that you fire a couple of hundred jacketed bullets first. Get the inside of that bore conditioned, leave it that way. That smooths it out, and now you'll have a barrel which is less likely to foul and grab hold of lead particles as it goes down through the bore. Now, with that sort of a situation, you do not want to try to remove lead with any kind of a chemical agent, because those things are far too harsh for anybody to be using on gun steel. Regardless of what the manufacturer claims, anything that's harsh enough to attack that lead is having some negative effect on other elements of the gun steel. What you need to do instead is to use one of the most common ways that people have removed lead accumulation in a barrel is like a Lewis lead remover, which is just a rod with a rubber button on the end, and there's a little piece of copper screen, like window screen, that's pulled through, and that basically strips that lead out. It's usually one or two passes through, and it pulls out all the lead. If you've got a situation like that, you really need to find a better alloy, because that's going to plague you. You just simply got bullets that are too soft. A good combination of alloy and together with the velocity that you're firing, is always going to protect you from having any kind of lead fouling issues. I do a lot of bullet casting myself, and I'm rather I'm a rather lazy person. I like to shoot, but I don't, and I like to load, but I don't like to spend hours over a lubricating press, putting bullets through one after another. I've already made the things, and now I still have to load them and all that business. I don't want to be standing there, squeezing bullets up through a lubricating press. What I like to do is just tumble them in Lee Alox. It's a liquid. It looks like grandma's molasses. You just simply put a few drops on the, squirt a little bit on the bullets and tumble them as if you're shaking popcorn, with butter. And when leave them to sit out on a piece of butcher's paper overnight, and the things are glazed with. It's really about the same thing as the old Winchester Western Lubaloy bullets that you'd buy for your 38, special. It does a great job, and I have never had. I fire all kinds of stuff. I fire 32 Winchester specials, in my Model 94. And those are much higher velocity than anything that you're going to fire with a 44 Magnum. And I have no leading issues whatsoever with that stuff. That stuff is, to me, that's beautiful. You don't even have to size it. When I'm doing the loading, I also use the factory crimping die, and the factory crimping die actually forms the case down around the bullet and dimensionally sizes the bullet at the same time. So while I'm seating the bullet, I'm actually achieving perfect bullet diameter on the inside of the case. To me, that's the simple way to go. A lot of people like to make it more complicated than that, but like I say, I'm a little bit lazy. I'd rather do the shooting. But anyway, when it comes to cleaning your barrel, just stick with simple solvents. Whichever one works, they all work. Anything that's a gun cleaning solvent, the less expensive and the less fussy there is, that's the way to go. You can tell immediately if you've got a gun cleaning solvent that works. If you squirt it on the inside of the receiver, that's say your Model 1911, after you've fired a bunch of ammo that's been loaded with unique powder, You put a few drops of that on it and you just watch it for 15 seconds. If you see that carbon migrating, you know that you're cutting through it, and that's all there is to it. You know, it just releases that carbon and helps it go away. So that's all there is to it, and I hope that you do a lot of shooting and a lot less cleaning in your life. And please leave all that copper in the barrel where it belongs. Bye-bye, and God bless.